we'll work through these technical issues there as we get here. Well, good afternoon. My name is Cliff Wilds, and I am a commercial banker with Morris Bank here in Statesboro. And on behalf of the directors, officers, and staff at Morris Bank, we would like to welcome you to today's Building a Better Bulloch Together luncheon event. We are fortunate to live in such a thriving community, and as a community bank, we feel that it's important to take advantage of any platform that we can to provide information that is beneficial not only to our customers, but to the community as a whole. In just a few minutes, you will hear from a distinguished panel of local legislators, who you'll hear more about shortly, to give us some updates on things happening around the area. But before we begin today's program, I would like to recognize a few folks who were instrumental in putting together today's event. If you would, please help me recognize Morris Bank team members Casey Hagan, Brandon Smith, Elena Averett, Jessica Savage, Farron Rushing, and Trish Tootle for all of the hard work that they did to make today's event possible. I would also like to recognize any of our local leaders who may be in attendance, either with the City Council or any of our county commissioners. If you would, please raise your hand to be recognized. And we thank you guys for your leadership here on the local level. And finally, I wanted to recognize and thank Stacy Underwood and his staff at Uncle Shug's for the meal provided. All right, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Roach, who will go over some housekeeping items and help us get started on today's program. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Cliff. Again, my name is John Roach. I'm going to try to navigate us through this afternoon with this great panel of guest speakers that we have today. A few housekeeping items I want to talk about is the questions for today had already been submitted through email prior to the program. So we could just move through this in a timely manner. But with that in mind, if you have questions that come up during this time, please take time to use the notepad and fill it out with a speaker and a question and your contact information, and drop it off as you leave in the bowl in the back. Now I'd like to take some time to give our speakers some time to give some background on themselves and their responsibilities at the state level. Representative Franklin.
Well, first of all, I just want to say how much I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I was sitting out here looking out at the crowd, and there's so many amazing leaders and people in our community. It's very humbling, the fact that we can all come together. We have a strong, strong community. And we've had it for a long time. And not only that, we've had a strong delegation. So, I mean, we're here, of course, but, you know, Bill Hitchens is not here, Butch Parrish and Lisa Hagan. I've worked very well with all of those people, and it's just been kind of an amazing experience. But as you know, this is my first, it was my first session, and I've had an incredible good time up there. Speaker Burns has been so nice to me for sure, and made sure that I didn't hit any pitfalls. But yeah, it was a learning experience for sure. I kind of tell everybody that I equate it to the first year at the Citadel, when we have a year called the knob year, and you kind of have to go through kind of a trial and error kind of time, and if you make it out of it, then you can kind of stay for the next 3 years. But it was a very good experience, and I truly enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to the next one. But yeah, see if I can get this behind me.
Yeah, thank y'all for being here. It is a great crowd, and I thank Senator Tillery for being here, because he sees again what a great place to live Statesboro, Georgia is. I'm very fortunate. I've been up there 3 years, and I'm kind of like Lehman. You're talking about Citadel. The first 2 years, I was on committees, and it felt like I was a pledge of a fraternity, because sometimes people spoke to you, and sometimes they did not. And we were very fortunate to receive some strong committee assignments through our great Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. And I'm currently chairman of the Higher Education Committee, but I'm also chairman of the Appropriations Subcommittee on K through 12 and higher education. And what that means is education is about $32 billion, Mr. Chairman. $32 billion, and we represent education is about budget 32 billion. Education's about 52% of that. So huge responsibility, but it's really been very, very rewarding. I'm also on the Finance Committee and on the Economic Development and Tourism Committee. And I just want to share one thing to you. You know, a lot of people call us and say, Senator, what about Senate bill this or House bill that type of deal? And I really am a little bit taken back because people, you really think that there's just a few bills that go on up there. And I took a picture, and we got a group called Legislative Council, which writes all our bills for us. And I went to Legislative Council on March 29th. And from January 10th, we went in session until March 29th. They had a sign on the wall. They had drafted 4,343 bills for the 2-month session and 1,242 resolutions. So when you ask us about a bill, be a little more specific about what you're asking about, because it is a little bit overwhelming. But thank you again for the opportunity to be here.
Well, thank y'all for letting me be here. I'm Blake Tillery. I'm from Vidalia. I represent 11 counties in southeast Georgia. None of them are Bulloch. So have you ever heard the saying, if you're sitting at a poker table and you don't know who the mark is, then you're the mark? That's kind of how I feel right now. I'm trying to figure out what these guys have got me up here for, what's going to happen next. But they're all my friends and have become quite close friends as we've navigated the politics of Georgia and southeast Georgia together, particularly over the past 5 years, as you've seen from at one point in time when we thought we were going to have to cut our state budget by 15 to 20%, to then all of a sudden we're going, holy crap, there's so much money. How much can we actually give back to people, since we do know it came from them in the first place? And then, of course, the economic announcements that have happened contiguous to our area that are only going to benefit our area. I know that's something that you guys want to talk about here today. Let me tell you from an outsider looking in, I get to represent 11 counties in southeast Georgia. I'm an attorney in Vidalia. My wife's an OBGYN. We get to look at Statesboro and see you maybe differently than you view yourselves. Everyone, when they look in the mirror in the morning, they see the wrinkles, they see the pimples, they see the hair that's going gray. But everyone that's sitting around you, they don't see that at all. They see what you have done, not just in the past 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, but the past 10, 20, and 50 years, to be not only a regional player, but a statewide player and a national-wide player because of what you've done in your investments in higher education, your investments in K-12, and your investments in the business community. Those don't happen without people pushing. One of the phrases that I learned in science was the theory of inertia. Inertia works both ways, right? If things aren't moving, it's hard as heck to get them started. But once you do get them moving, it's also hard as heck to stop them. And Bulloch County and Statesboro particularly has had things moving for a long time. Appreciate y'all letting me be over here today.
Good afternoon. I was, excuse me, I was checking to see if it was morning, but it is afternoon. So good afternoon. This is why Bulloch County does so well, because y'all show up in this community and this city at Statesboro, and this community of Bulloch County has always showed up. My name is John Burns. I live over in northern Effingham County. Met my beautiful wife Dale here at Georgia Southern a few years ago, and we've never had a fight since that time that I won, right? So it's been one of those kind of relationships. So it's good to have Dale. Y'all know these guys up at this table know that we can't do what we do. It's a team effort, and it's a good effort, but we can't do what we do without being part of great communities. And I appreciate y'all allowing me to be a part of this community since I've been in the House. It's been a great ride, and I want to reflect back just for a second on a couple of folks that have served Bulloch County very strongly over the years, but one of my mentors is Bob Lane, who served in the House for 30 years. Then, of course, Jan Tankersley, who Lehman's just replaced, who did a great job from down in the Brooklyn area, or from Brooklyn, representing this county. So what a great job and great legacy Jan has left in the House, Chairman Tankersley. And of course, I can't think any further than that without thinking about our dear friend Jack Hill. So what a legacy Jack Hill left in this community and all over our state. So we miss Jack, don't we? But we've got some pretty good guys working really hard over in the Senate representing him. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate Blake Tillery, who who of course is chairman of Appropriations in the Senate, has done a good job. And he worked with Jack before Jack passed, and he's carried on Jack's work and is very much respected. And of course, Senator Billy Hickman has a long reach in Southeast Georgia, not just in Bulloch County, but he's been a part of our communities here for many years, and I certainly appreciate Billy. And I can't think of a better colleague to have than Lehman Franklin. He's experienced, he's come into the House, and his talents were recognized not only by me, but have recognized by our other colleagues, and he's really hit the ground running and representing this community and that y'all all know and love, and he does as well. So I appreciate all of my colleagues here. Yes, we do have great opportunities. Those opportunities are hard won. Geechee Technical College, the hard work's been done supporting the Geechee, the Georgia Southern University. What can I say? This community has been a leader for many, many years in higher ed and vocational ed. So we're in a good spot. Southeast Georgia's in a good spot. You have a good team with Butch Parrish representing part of Bulloch County, and certainly Lisa Hagan, as was mentioned. We're all about Southeast Georgia. We have a very close association with our members in Chatham County, and so we have a great team, I believe, that's in place and certainly looks out for each other and looks out for our part of the state. And I think that cooperation is very evident. And as I look at Roy and the commissioners around the table, I appreciate y'all's work on the local level and your wisdom and your vision for this county. So I'm glad to see y'all. We look forward to answering some questions, and just glad to be a part of this delegation and a part of this community. And thanks for letting me be that.
I can. All right. Instead of making them work out their lunch they just had, we'll try to navigate this. All right, so let's dive right into it, gentlemen. What new improvements are being considered along the I-16 corridor to help prepare for increased volumes of traffic that are stemming from the growth of the port and that will also stem from the new Hyundai plant? All right.
You know, y'all, and I'm sure John's writing notes, so he knows a lot more about this than I do. But you know, we're so fortunate. I'm gonna do a little bit like Blake told me a few minutes ago. We're so fortunate to have a guy by the name of Russell McMurray, who is the commissioner of DOT. Russell graduated in the first civil engineering class from Georgia Southern. He is very attuned to Statesboro and Bulloch County, and knowing his vision and knowing we know he's right on top of that. You know, I heard last night that I watched a little video, and I think I sent it out, what all was going on at the port. Right now, there's 21 million square feet of warehousing going on down in the Savannah area. Already got 30 million completed this year. They anticipate up to 150 million square feet of warehousing space. So that tells you what all is going on. So Russell and them have got to be constantly aware, and I'm sure they're planning on what's going on. I know we got a new interchange going down on I-16 for the Hyundai plant and a renovation of the 220 Highway 280 interchange. So John, hand it off, John.
What a great opportunity that we're going to have to manage very well as it will impact all of us in Southeast Georgia when it comes to Hyundai and all of the satellite providers and the economic development and job opportunities. But Billy's certainly correct. An interchange, improvements, and good friends in DOT. So that's the posture we're in as far as we look at especially transportation infrastructure. This community has been very successful in transportation infrastructure. I've seen great improvements over the years. You've had folks like Raymond Anderson working very hard for you. And I'll mention a couple other names as well. And then I want to say something about some planning that's taken place. Ann Purcell knows this community. She's been a part of this community. She represents District 1 on the DOT board, but certainly Greg Morris from Vidalia, who represents District 12, have been very, very helpful in ensuring that we get the right transportation funding. There's a plan, there's some planning that's in place that's the coastal empire plan that's taking a look at all of the infrastructure around the ports, up I-16 to Statesboro, and looking at the new patterns we'll see in not only port traffic, but containers and the products that come in to Hyundai and go back out, but as we look at folks who will be traveling down I-16. And we all know the growth on I-16 when we remember when there were not many automobiles and trucks on I-16 to a very, very busy 4-lane highway. And that's only going to get more complicated as the next few years pass. So they're looking at those improvements, trying to strategize on those improvements around the ports, then up 16 with the interchange that Billy alluded to, improvements on 280, improvements on 80 that come all the way up into Statesboro, that we'll see those changes to help ensure that we have the right mobility. I do believe that we have folks that recognize, and Billy alluded to Russell McMurray, who's of course, our DOT commissioner. He understands this part of the world. He understands logistics, and probably most importantly, and they understand, they're studying along with Janine Miller, who's our planning director, understands of spending time what all the growth and how complicated it is, and how complicated is getting even more expected to be here very, very soon. They're looking at those. We've done a Georgia Commission on Freight and Logistics study that's we just reauthorized, guys. Y'all remember during the session looking at a couple of things: how trucks and logistics move, freight moves, but also how we pay for it. So those are the important parts. So we've got lots of plans, but it's pretty expensive to pay for these things. And I know that you've been a part of House Bill 170 over the years, and we look at how we fund transportation in this state. So along with your investments from the House and Senate, we invest over $2 billion, probably $2.4 billion of our dollars go into transportation in this state. It's making a difference, and we appreciate y'all working with us on that and being a supporter. Governor Kemp has been a huge partner as we work towards how we deal with the infrastructure concerns that we'll have around job creation in this state. His primary objective is he's looked at all of these opportunities, as we like to say. And so I think we have a great vision of where we need to be. We have a great vision of where we've been, and we know where the improvements are, and we're working and striving every day to make sure we have the right appropriations in place to make sure we can make these improvements to make all of our lives better, not just for today, but for the days to come for our children and grandchildren. Let me do one more thing while I got the microphone. So one of the things this community's worked on for a number of years, for the last few years, that Billy's been involved in, Lehman, and many of you in the audience, and you've made great efforts, is the Blue Mile. And then a project that's associated with the Blue Mile, I think it's a creek project. Would that be correct, Doug? Can I reference it that way? So there are several pieces of critical infrastructure improvements that need to be put in place before some of those projects can move forward. So Russell McMurray, as Billy said, a Georgia Southern student, former Georgia Southern student, and certainly a great interest in our community, has allowed me the honor this morning, he along with Ann Purcell, to let this community know there will be a $6 million appropriations put in place that will fund the replacement of the bridge on 301 that goes over the creek project that is essential to for that project to move forward. So we appreciate Russell making those dollars available, and that'll be in the FY25 budget. It takes a while to get transportation projects done. And there's more good news. So as part of the creek project, there's $2.65 million that's in the FY23 that will also fund a design project for the work on the Blue Mile on the Creek Trail. So things are moving forward. This community has certainly put its best foot forward, and we appreciate Russell and his team working with us to make sure those projects can come to fruition and we have a plan in place we can move forward with. So thanks to these guys, those folks in the delegation that have worked hard to make this work, and to all the local players, we appreciate those work, and those that have worked so hard to make both of these projects come to fruition. And more work to be done, but this will certainly be an opportunity to help build on that success and move it forward.
Thank you, Speaker Burns. That's great news to hear for this community. Leading on to the second question, are there any legislative proposals from the state concerning a new push in the auto industry to move towards electronic vehicles?
Well, I could probably take that one. I ought to be able to answer this one, right? Thinking about this question, there's a lot of variables in it in order to answer it. And of course, we know about the Hyundai plant coming in. But I just want to tell you kind of a little bit of how I see it. So when I was in college, I think it was maybe my sophomore year, the BMW plant came to Greenville, South Carolina. And they had worked on that, of course, probably 10 years or 5 years before that. But it kind of hit the ground whenever I was in my time in university down there. And I saw how that plant affected and changed that community in Greenville. And I got to tell you, it did a great thing for that community. It dynamically changed everything about it and made it stronger. If you go there now, I don't know if you've been over there, but they actually have a river going through their community like we're fixing to have. I think there's going to be a lot of parallels with that community and ours, and I think they did a good job at it. And it's probably a pretty good rule for us to follow, to go see what they did and learn from their mistakes and pick up on what they did good. But so seeing that, I believe that we're going to see a lot of the same features or same results in our community that they experienced. So, and that brings back to electrical vehicles. But so there's a big push for electrical vehicles in all the state, of course. Kemp is pushing with the Rivian plant up in the north part, the Kia plant up in, I think it's West Point, Georgia, and then we got the Hyundai plant here. And then on the national level, you've got a big push of EVs. So there seems to be a big push on EVs everywhere. National laws, I think you still can get about $7,400 on a discount on an EV when you purchase it, but they're moving that so fast, it's hard to keep up, to be honest with you. That's on the national level, though. On the state level, we're preparing for it, but like I said, there's many variables. So we have, I think it's House Bill 146 or Senate Bill 146, that we passed this term, and it basically allows or puts the groundwork of how we're going to be able to tax these electrical vehicles, because there's no gas tax on it. So there was about 3 or 4, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but there's about 3 or 4 study committees last summer to determine how to do that. And I went to a couple of them, and I was this was before I was sworn in, but I was super impressed at the work that they put to it. I mean, there was hours and hours and hours of work put into that to figure out how to do it. And they took a lot of suggestions, and I believe that bill incorporates the best answer to the problem. But it basically, I believe, puts Georgia ahead of pretty much any state in the union right now. We're light years ahead of any other state, as far as I'm concerned, with this one bill. So that clarifies that up, and it allows us to be able to know how to look at taxing that EV, but also put in the charging stations throughout the state and where they need to be, how they're going to be paid for, and working with all the entities involved with that. So that's a big push. But the other factor in it is that, I forgot what I was about to say on that one. But anyway, that's probably the biggest factor. I know that. So the Hyundai plant, the other variable is that with all this growth, you're going to have all the workers that come in. And I know I might be skipping around, but that's a variable in this. And maybe you guys can talk more on it, but there's probably about 6 or 7 different bills that we did on the state level to be able to incorporate how that's going to look. The housing growth, the workers' growth, to make it easier for people to come in here, educational growth. But all that spins around the EV, I believe. You want to share anything on that?
The 2 questions just asked really dovetail together. We spend about $2 billion on roads. 10% goes to local governments. The county commissioners here hear about that in LMIG. It's paid on a mileage and total mileage and center line road maintenance. We actually had to put $1 billion in the budget this year because we suspended the gas tax. Remember, Governor Kemp suspended the gas tax. Had we not put that money back, then your local governments would not have received their LMIG, or they would have been greatly reduced by about 9 months reduction. So when they're talking about the growth at the port and Hyundai, and then we're talking about the EV push, as you see more and more cars go electric, as Lehman alluded to, they don't pay a motor fuel tax. So how do you cover the cost of the maintenance of the roads? And if we're not collecting that motor fuel tax, then how do your local governments cover their LMIG loss? So the plan that's been sort of laid out right now, it'll be studied for another year or two as it moves forward, is can you make that megawatt equivalent to a mile per gallon to keep it as close as possible? Also allowing for electricity right now, if the city of Statesboro decided that they wish to put meters downtown and let folks charge their vehicles themselves. So they want to be forward thinking. One of my communities tried to do that. They were all for it. They had federal grants to make sure they could put them in place. And I told them that afternoon, I said, you do realize though that you have to cover the electrical. There's no provision in law that allows you to sell electricity unless you're a MGAG or an MEAG, which is a municipal city, which we're not, or you are Georgia Power or an EMC. So the laws had to be changed there to allow, if you want to be I guess a good Samaritan of sorts and have a electrical charging station at the front of your office, that might help you bring more business in. But I don't think you necessarily want to also cover the cost of the electricity that they're using. So state law had to be changed there to make those work out. There's a lot of other stuff. We could literally spend the next hour talking about just this one topic. But please do know there's a lot of folks thinking about it.
Thank you. All right, the third question for the panel will be, are there planned updates or revisions to the current Georgia conservation land that would affect landowners of Bulloch County?
I'll mention a couple of things on that. And of course, I see a couple of farmers here, David Cromley. A lot of you are very aware that in the 22 session, we passed a bill called the Right to Farm Bill, which actually protects our family farms from subdivisions coming in and, filing lawsuits against them, that type of thing. So we put that in place. In this past session, great senator with Senator Tillery and I, Russ Goodman, had a bill that was called a Farmland Conservation Act, and it's Senate Bill 220. And what that did was, because we were all very concerned about farms. We can't forget about that agriculture is still the number one industry in the state of Georgia, number one. And so we got to protect our family farms, we got to protect our farm. All the growth is great, but we obviously, and I know the county commission has been dealing with this, and the city to a certain extent, we've got to find that balance between growth and farming. And then we got to protect it. We got to know the growth is coming. We also got to protect the farmers. But so Senator Goodman's bill, conservation bill, allowed a family farm, if they wanted to, they could put it in the conservation, Farmland Conservation Act, and it would stay a family farm till eternity. And now that's a long time. So when someone does that, they got to be willing to say that this farm is going to be a farm forever and ever, ever and ever and ever. So we got that bill in place. So, I don't see those type of things happening around here, but in Southwest Georgia, where things are kind of slow, and it's probably going to have more of that. But so we got some things in place to protect the family farm.
The last change we made to the actual CUVA law, which many of you, if you have more than 10 acres of property, go put your land in CUVA. It's a huge tax savings to you. The county commissioners don't want me to say that part though. I was one of them. I could say it. FLIPA pays the county back, CUVA doesn't. In the last change we made was actually to allow, if you were putting solar panels on your property, it didn't breach the CUVA, or there was only 1 year of payment for the breach. I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth now, so that's the last change we made. I voted for it, but it has me a little nervous. And let me tell you why. We look at a generation, we think it's 50 years. So if you look back from today, 50 years ago would be roughly 1974. That's a generation. 50 years ago in 1974, we had 12.6 million acres of farmland. Today, we have 9.8 million acres of farmland. That means in 50 years, in one generation, we've lost 20% of our farmland. You can't continue to do that for reasons of national security, among others. I'm glad that we're moving, as we talked about EVs. I'm excited about where we may be able to move on electricity. If we can put solar panels on people's houses, that reduces costs for transmission lines, among many other things. But I, at least, am a little bit skeptical right now because of the space that solar takes of it being wide-scale use. I'm concerned that we may be taking farmland because we can pay, because we're subsidizing it at a federal level so much, we can pay so much more for rentals to a farmer to convert to solar. They'd be crazy not to take the short-term gain, but the long-term harm to our country is something that I'm watching that I'm concerned about.
Along the same lines, I also read an article back, because the solar things are becoming such a big deal. John can tell us a lot more about that. Excuse me, Chairman Burns, Speaker Burns. I still have a hard time. I've known this guy probably 40 some odd years, so I still have a hard time dealing with that. But, there's been some articles written that actually, because the solar panels rotate with the sun, that actually over a period of time, it ends up killing the dirt underneath it, because the dirt underneath the solar don't get any sunlight. So that's going to become a big concern. So it's like Senator Tillery said, but you got people that own land that don't live here in Bulloch County anymore, and they can rent this land for $1,000 an acre for solar farms, and farmland, even irrigated land's about $300 an acre, something like that. So you can see where all this stuff is moving.
All right, and staying in the arena of environmental studies, have there been any environmental studies completed that will show the effect of proposed growth in this area, in particular the rezoning of ag land and residential land use?
I think kind of what I said.
Yeah.
These guys answered the question very well. But this country is built on the right of private property and the enjoyment of your private property. And there's a balance here. And they struck some of that balance on and how that should operate. Can you be upset with a family who wants to create generational wealth if they want to use their property for another purpose? I think there's a definite discussion to be had in a county like this one, in this state, to make sure we strike that balance and that we're respectful of all of those folks who've owned property and respectful of their right to enjoy that property in whatever way they see fit. I think there's a balance to be struck there, so I'll say that. And to Billy's point, I think one of the really good things, well, Blake said CUVA, and I said I wasn't going to jump on this one, but I will. We jealously guard CUVA and FLIPA in the General Assembly because they are two programs that have allowed rural Georgia, if you will, and that's timber and farmland, row cropping land, to remain with the family farm. And those have been hugely successful and are hugely important to us all that like to breathe clean air and like to have clothes on our backs and food on the table. So we guard those because they do make that possible. We want to make you aware, and some of the things we've talked about, the governor hasn't signed yet. He hasn't signed SB, what is that? Has he signed the conservation bill yet? I don't think he has. He hasn't signed these yet, so we'll tell you what we think is going to happen because it's good legislation. You may have the opportunity to be a participant in protecting farmland because it's going to allow the folks it'll allow appropriations from state government to come in and help satisfy some of the purchase of an easement on a family farm that may give that family some income, if you will, in the short term, but it's also going to allow private donations for those purposes as they go into these funds that will be managed by our Department of Agriculture and from the large organizations around this country that seek to protect farmland. Those things are critically important to what we do when we protect property and we protect families and we protect their interest. And with that point, I'll just say the greatest environmentalists are the folks who live on the land. They have always been that, and that will never change. We have a robust EPD in the state that looks at many different applications that will go on property. Sometimes most of the time they get it right. Sometimes they don't always get it just right. So that's why we have to stay engaged. But those are things we look at, I think, from a standpoint of how we deal with continued growth and development and how it's going to impact us. Certainly from an environmental standpoint, we need to be good stewards.
Let me just mention one more thing. With all the growth we got, it's great, and like we said, we got to balance it. We can't forget that without growth, we don't have votes. We lost in the last census, we gained 1 million people in Georgia, but people forget about that's not really true. South Georgia lost 200,000 people, and North Georgia gained 1.2 million people. So what does that mean for us? That means that we lost 1 full Senate vote in South Georgia, and we lost 3 House votes in South Georgia, and they moved up to North Georgia, Atlanta area. So that's why we got to have this balance of this growth, because over a period of time, if we don't do that, we lose more and more votes, and we have no say-so. And that's why it's so important for y'all to be involved and to work with us and give us suggestions also so we can keep this thing moving, because we've got to have the support of the people here. And the people up in the Atlanta area, I don't want to characterize, but they don't have the same, a lot of those people don't have the same values and characteristics that we have, and we need y'all's help. So just kind of keep that in mind when we're all working together.
All right, thank you. We've touched on the Savannah ports a little bit, but this question refers to what is the continued growth and expansion of not just the Savannah port, but also the Port of Brunswick that will affect Bulloch County in their areas.
What a great economic engine we have in the Georgia Ports Authority. And I think I read and listen like you guys do. I think what we know now, they're continuing to expand the berths for containers in Savannah, the Garden City terminal, and they're moving the entirety of the auto business to Brunswick, which is, I think, the leading auto port in the country. So we have a lot to be proud of in that growth. Of course, Savannah, I think they're getting ready to invest a couple of more $1 billion in Ocean Terminal to ensure they are very efficient there. And certainly a lot of folks in Bulloch County, I know, like in Southeast Georgia, are employed at the ports and are impacted what goes on around the ports. Every county in this state is impacted by something that comes in from the ports or leaves the ports and goes out as an export. So every county in the state has a stake, and that was what we saw when we voted for harbor deepening a few years ago to fund our part of the harbor deepening. Everyone has a stake in the ports. Georgia ports, we've continued to do, y'all know, y'all see the containers, y'all see the trucks, y'all see the traffic, the congestion that commerce brings. There's been an effort, as you also probably know, that the Mason Mega Rail Yard has been a big effort. I think they take 26% of the containers off the road that goes on rail now. They can put together 6-unit trains and unload 6-unit trains at a time down there. So the operation, the logistical operation is, for me, is almost incomprehensible on what occurs at the Georgia Ports Authority just in the Garden City Terminal. So we're continuing to deal with that growth. The plans we have, not just for Hyundai, but for the continued growth of the port, especially in our transportation infrastructure, is something that's a challenge. And we need all hands on deck, whether it's local authorities, local representatives from the counties that surround the ports. And as we look at what's going to happen with employment coming from as far away as Toombs County and Tattnall County that are big transitioning to the ports, when we see what happens with the folks we're preparing to work at the ports from Georgia Southern with the Geechee Technical College. This is something that impacts us all. It's something that we can manage on a positive basis and will be good for us and for our future as we look to all of the satellite industries that surround the ports, not Hyundai or anything that's coming there, but surround the ports. They're right here in Bulloch County. We need to make sure we have the right policies in place to continue to support those folks and make sure that we have people to work there. We need to make sure we have worker training, and we're doing that. We have a robust projects going on out at Ogeechee. We're proud of what they're doing. They're being noticed, and they're getting a lot of attention in the budget and elsewhere.
How many of you have ever gone down and toured the port? Is there a show of hands? 25% of the room? You know you can. You don't have to, you can call Billy, you can call me, Lehman, anyone. They'll take you down, they'll actually drive you around. It's a fascinating experience. See, Savannah's not the biggest port. It's not even the best place to be a port. It is far west. The reason why Savannah's prospered is because it's the furthest west port. So if you actually line up the longitudes, I think we fall right in line with Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Folks don't think about Savannah being that far west, but what it allows people who are bringing goods in to do is they can get their goods to market further into the United States faster. So that's why Savannah's done well. That and one other factor, which is its efficiency. They prided themselves and said, look, we're not going to be the biggest. We're going to have this narrow channel you're going to have to come down. You guys have eaten on River Street and seen you can't put two boats beside each other when they're going down through there. So they pride themselves on efficiency and said, we're going to be the absolute best at what we're doing. It's really a cool Georgia concept. It's a concept that I think Bulloch County's replicated for years. It said, hey, listen, we're not going to be right on the interstate. We're off it. We're not going to be right in your travel lane, but we're going to be the best when you get here. And so I think the Georgia Ports is a really good example of also what you've done here in Bulloch County.
All right. Next question. Are there any current legislative efforts in place to help assist the counties with meeting educational needs from a growing population?
I think that's kind of a leading question. Many of y'all know that we have worked very hard in the last year on literacy. And through this process, we've learned many things, and I'll share that with you in just a second. But one of the big things is there's a House Bill 87 that really took a lot of work between the Senate and the House the past year to get extended. And why is that important? We've got over 6,000 kids in Georgia that go to school at night. These are high school kids from ninth grade to 12th grade. And they go to school at night for various reasons, because they may live with their grandmother and they support their grandmother, and they had to drop out of school to go at night. Lehman and I went out and spent probably 3 hours one afternoon out at William James. We got 140 kids here, and the school in this area is called Coastal Plains. There's actually 3 of them, Coastal Plains. I forget the other 2, but anyway. So the 140 kids here, we interviewed three of the children. One of them was an African-American young man who actually did live with his grandmother, supported his grandmother, and dropped out of high school in order to work. And we interviewed 2 more. One was a young lady that had a small child, similar situation. Now, my point of all that, these kids would have been dropouts. They would have been on the street. They would have been teenage pregnancy. They have been in jail, because there's no opportunities, as y'all well know, out there now for dropouts. So we have now looked at education in a different way. We're looking at education as what may have not worked in the past. We got to figure it out, because it's got to work in the future. Because we know without educated workforce, we will not have people to fill these jobs. We were very fortunate this past session through Blake's leadership and all that one of the top 5 priorities in the Senate this year was something called creating an educated workforce. And as you dig into this stuff more and more, you'll find out that only in the state of Georgia, so many things are measured about how children are reading on 3rd grade level. It's actually 3, 5, and 8th grade levels. In the 3rd grade in the state of Georgia, only 43.49% of the children in the state of Georgia are reading on grade level. That means 57% are not. And the prison system, people will tell you that they determine the number of prison beds being built, a projection based upon the characteristics in the 3rd grade. So we jumped on that pretty hard and through a bill that I was primary sponsor on, Senate Bill 211, we created something called Georgia Council on Literacy, which would be a council that will work for 3 years looking at how we change this. Children do not have to go to pre-kindergarten. I didn't know that. Children do not have to go to kindergarten. I didn't know that. Okay, we're going to look at that. We got to look at whether teachers are being taught how to teach children how to read in school. Okay, we've got to look at whether there are common metrics in the system for measuring kids. If you talk to different organizations, they have different metrics for measuring how well these kids are doing. Okay, another big factor is we've got to get more community involvement in it. That's a big, big deal. I'd love to one day, and many of you heard me say this, I'd love to one day drive into Bulloch County and it say, Bulloch County, home with the highest literacy rate in the state of Georgia, instead of Bulloch County, home of so-and-so state football champions. That's when we'll be successful. That's when we'll make a difference. We got over 22% of the people experience some form of dyslexia, and we're not doing anything about testing for that. That's the issue. We got in some of our communities, and probably in Senator Tillery's community is higher in this, the Hispanic population. We got children that are being taught English in the schools and going home to parents at night that can't speak English. Okay, so we'll go to that. So working very hard on that. Another big thing through Representative Bethany Ballard, she had a bill, House Bill 538. Have we had any teachers in here or retired teachers in here? Okay, we do. Well, you know about this. We're gonna put phonics back in school. Children are gonna read based upon breaking words down and sounding them out instead of these sight words and all that. So how are we gonna build a workforce? It's not gonna come fast. It's not gonna come easy. So we've recognized and we recognize a real need for it. Now, but I'll let someone else finish it up.
Thank you, Senator Hickman. The next question will still stay in the educational arena. Are there any projects that are coming through for the Board of Regents to help assist our area with educational programs? And not just Georgia Southern, but also I'm going to add in Geechee Tech.
Bulloch County has done very well with the state budget, as you could probably imagine by the quality of caliber representatives you have here. Let's just go back and look at FY22, $36 million for the Jack and Ruth Ann Hill Convocation Center at Georgia Southern. I see Brian out there shaking his head somewhere. What you've seen go at Geechee Tech in just the amended budget, $19.9 million in the amended budget for Geechee Tech for robotics and trainings that we think is going to be specifically related to things going on with Hyundai and their suppliers. But there's even more than that. You see, you got the speaker over here, and the speaker is absolutely committed to making sure that Southeast Georgia has the health care that it needs for a growing population and for an older population. So what he did, and the powers of the speaker, I get to brag on him a little bit, is he put some money in there that said, you know, we've had a medical school here in our state, one state school for a while in Augusta, and it's got a satellite over in Athens, but why do we not have one of those in southern Georgia? So the speaker, through his wisdom, was able to cajole, maybe that's the right word, elbow, maybe, who knows what it is, help the Board of Regents understand why that matters. So there's money, there's seed money in this year's budget, it's still, I guess, pending the governor's signature, that would create a medical school or be the first part of a medical school in Savannah. That's a tie-in with, could be in with Georgia Southern and also with Augusta State University. That is huge for our area. And give yourself a round of applause, Mr. Speaker, thank you. Well, Billy Hickman couldn't let the House show him up, so Billy started talking about, well, what other things could we do? And we started talking about a potential dental school. There are plans in a budget to potentially do that here. There's got a lot more steps in the process. There's about $6 million. The reason we funded it heavier was because we understood that we've got to fund it heavier because it's not necessarily as high of a priority budget item. but that would potentially be in connection with the medical school. We only have one state dental school too. In Augusta, we have a second one in Emory, but it's not state run. What we would love to see, what I would love to see, and this is separate from these guys, so this is my own pipe dream, is I would love to see Statesboro be the medical center that we've seen Augusta, Mercer, and other places be. I think it's good for our future. I think it not only it makes us inflationary proof and somewhat recession proof. Should we see a turn down in EV markets, knowing that EVs are going to drive a lot of the economy around here, we need something also. The university helps buffer that somewhat, but we need something else that's private sector makeup to help buffer our economy should transportation take another change over the next 20 to 50 years.
Very good.
All right, thank you. That's great news. The next question, I believe, is in relation to other areas of the state that have experienced the proposed growth that's expected in Bulloch County and surrounding counties, are there any lessons learned that could help us prepare our area for this growth?
So the appropriations process is a team process, right, guys? It's and that's what it's about. But we're excited about two things that came down, and I'm going to answer that one too. It's part of that, but it's we're very excited about the excitement there is around a new medical school, partnership medical school that will be ramping up and have its first cohort of students in just a few years, and then be we'll look forward to one day to be a standalone. And certainly Georgia Southern cast a big shadow, has a wide footprint. We had some properties that were underutilized on the Armstrong campus. It was a perfect fit for this project, so we'll see that come into fruition very soon. So thanks to the Senate and the House working together, and I'm sure the governor sees the wisdom in this. I have no doubt about it. The other part of it, that ties us directly into the question, Geechee Technical College. They've been a leader in robotics over the years, but now this community will put together almost a $20 million project that will take that one step further. Are we doing anything to make sure we prepare the communities for this, what's coming, what's going to be here? Yes. We have to have workforce training. We have to make sure we have the health care component of taking care of folks. But Geechee Technical College is the leader in this state, is the leader in southeastern United States in robotics training. As we look at the workforce that's coming that we will need, there will be fewer of them, more highly trained, with certainly more technical support, whether it be in robotics or other purposes, and certainly from the folks who are employers that are sitting in this room. It's the new methods, it's the new world. We will all have to embrace that. So if we don't prepare ourselves for what we'll be seeing very shortly, then we're not doing our jobs. We're not doing our jobs up here. So we want to make sure we have the infrastructure in place to continue for us to be successful, and for our peoples, and for this to continue to be the best place to work, live, raise a family, and I like to add, have a little fun. So that's what's part of what's going on. That's the vision we have in the House. I know the Senate does as well, and I know Brian Kemp does as well too.
Let me mention one thing, and Senator Tillery, I'm surprised that he's a great, humble guy. But along with this Geechee Tech, it was a joint effort with Southeastern Tech and Vidalia, and that's really what you see these guys up here, and we're all working great together. But we all understand the word compromise. You know, we all understand it takes compromise to make things work. So we reached out to Senator Tillery and got Southeastern Tech also involved in the process, and I saw some of the Geechee Tech people here. That's what made this thing work. It's really an area, a group situation. So we're very proud of it.
Yeah, I just want to add, I mean, a lot of these answers are kind of running together with these, because a lot of them, they're all, like I said, variables that fold on top of each other. But I can tell y'all that just being up in the legislature and seeing how these gentlemen work, and how our state has been working. I can't speak highly enough about it. We have so many visionaries that are up there, so many smart individuals that know what to do and know how to put it in place, and they can get things done. And we're very fortunate in our area, in our delegation. I think, to be honest with you, and I guess I'm biased because I'm living down here, but I think that our delegation in our area is probably one of the strongest in all of the state. Not only do we have the leadership in place on the state level, I believe we got it at the local level, but we have the assets in place as well. I mean, we have the port here, we have the universities here, we have the technical school here, we have the leaders that are leading those assets in place that are strong. But, you know, when I was looking at this question, it says what lessons learned, you know, do we have in regards to growth? I believe that we have had the visionaries to look at our area and see what we have and what's coming in, and they know that they have to prepare for it, or a situation may happen. For example, you can look at Southwest Georgia, and that area it doesn't have the resources that we have. And a lot of those families that are there, you know, they've lived there their whole life, whatever, they have their children there, they raise their children there, their children go off to school, and their children really can't come back to that area because there's not any opportunities there for them. There's nothing for them to do there unless they're going to farm on the family farm or create some business down there, but it's very difficult. So you're having a withdrawal of the population moving to North Georgia or to areas where there's opportunities, or even out of the state. So we fortunately are not in that situation, and it's not something that just happened like a year ago, 2 years ago. I think that the mechanisms to put us in place of where we are now probably happened 10 to 15 years ago. I know the port is certainly that situation. I have my cousin who was a river pilot. He just retired about a year ago as a Savannah River pilot, and you know, he was there his whole career since he was 21 years old. I think he's around 60 something now, 67 now. But he was always saying, you know, it doesn't make sense why our port is so dominant. I think that you might have touched on this already, but I think that it's the second prosperous port under New York City on the East Coast, which is outstanding. It's incredible that little creek can handle that kind of load to bring it in. But we do, especially when we got right next door, we have Charleston that has a huge river, has a lot more capability to handle things. But the reason why that didn't take off, and Savannah did, is because the leadership that was in there. But anyway, the dynamics and the assets that we have here put us in a place of tremendous growth for the next 20 years to be able to take care of our families. And our families can stay here to raise other families. They don't have to move away. Just wanted to add that point in that.
Very good.
All right, thank you. Coming down the home stretch, I promise. The next question is related to medical again, and I've touched on that with what's coming on board, but I did want to maybe see if y'all could expand and maybe give some insight on rural health care and how that'll be impacted over the next few years, and is there anything in place for that?
Thank you, John. Yes, and I was just looking at my notes, the first cohort of 40 new physicians will be in place at Georgia Southern partnership with Augusta Medical University and our good friends Dr. Keel and Dr. Keene in 2024. We'll have our first 40 students, so that's pretty amazing to me, y'all. I want to tell you, they have a great chairman that deals with health care in the Senate. That's Dr. Ben Watson from Savannah. But one of our focuses in the House has been health care. And certainly y'all know about House Bill 520 and mental health and the emphasis we placed on that last year and again this year. But the other part of that is, in our focus on health care, we have 3 policy health care committees and 2 fiscal committees. So we happen to have a gentleman in this delegation who represents Bulloch County, Butch Parrish. Chairman Butch Parrish is the absolute most knowledgeable person in the General Assembly in health care. So I haven't made many good decisions, Lehman, but I made one there when we organized committees. Butch Parrish now heads all of our health care committees. They all the chairmen answer to Butch. And when someone wants to talk to me about health care, I said, no, I don't want to talk about it. You talk to Butch Parrish because he absolutely knows what he's talking about. And Butch has done a great job. He's been instrumental in the things we talked about with health care, with the expansions we've talked about. But our other focus is rural health care. How do we attract these physicians? By encouraging them to stay in Georgia once we train them here. And we've made sure they have the right incentives, if you will, to do their residencies here and then come back to rural Georgia and practice. It's huge for making sure that we have those opportunities available. We also know that Mercer is a great partner, not just UGA, just not what we're going to do with Georgia Southern or at the medical college, but Mercer University. CHOA just announced a $200 million partnership agreement with Mercer to expand rural health care. So rural health care in this state, whether it be through telemedicine, where it be expansions of docs coming back to communities, expanding the scope of practice for nurse practitioners and PAs, that's the things we're focused on. We want to make sure that we provide that level of health care for a growing population in rural Georgia, not just a declining population. Right. Billy?
All right. What efforts are being pushed by the Georgia Department of Economic and Development for recruitment for future employees in this area? Can I get a hand?
It's a general answer. If you got an answer,
Well, I mean, it kind of, there's a bunch of small bills, I'll say small bills, there's a bunch of small bills that allow us to be able to take in like professionals, for example. I don't know the bill number, but we passed a bill that allows nursing, anybody with a license basically, be able to transfer from out of state into Georgia with a very simple process. They don't really, if they've passed their bar or their exam or whatever in another state, they'd be able to move into Georgia, so that makes it a lot easier too. There's rural bills that allows be able to take over from college education, to be able to pay for that. There's also doctors to be able to come in and be able to pay for their medical expenses or medical bills in schooling. So there's a bunch of those. I don't know if you want to add more to it, but we have a lot of those. I don't know how to list them all down, but.
Yeah, one thing real quick, and I didn't know, but in talking to the Medical College of Georgia, I think they've got it already in place there now. Instead of a 4-year program for a doctor, they've reduced it down to 3 years. So they are very cognizant. And we got all kind of tax credits, Mr. Chairman, for doctors going to rural communities and that type of thing too.
I guess they gave you the better answers. I'll give you kind of the brass answer. We're not. We're not. And here's one of the reasons, one of the things that I think we can do better. And I heard the governor actually mention this and talk about this yesterday. I completely agree with him on this. Until we get to the point that we're not incentivizing staying at home as much as working, we're going to have a problem. We're going to have a problem across our state. What we've seen is that the people my age, many of your ages, the males between the age of about 30 and 50 haven't come back to work. And that was a driving portion of our workforce. I think the governor has been the leader on this. The legislature has tried to back him at every stance, that until we can help our friends in Washington realize that it does not do someone better to give them bread, it does it better to teach them to plant, we're going to continue to have that problem. And our businesses are going to continue to be forced to move towards more and more mechanization.
I'll say amen to that, Blake. There's no doubt about that. What are we doing? What's economic development doing? They're placing jobs and efforts all over Georgia, just not in metro, not just in southeast Georgia near Savannah, but in rural counties. We're providing jobs in rural counties. Now, what kind of jobs, what's the incentive when they do come back to work? A good paying job, so they can be good providers. So I think Pat Wilson and his crowd at Economic Development, in conjunction with the governor, are trying to attract good paying jobs in Georgia. Not just a job, but good paying jobs, good companies that will come to these communities, Statesboro, Bulloch County, Scriven County, Effingham County, Chatham County, Bryan County, and be a good citizen who will give back to Georgia Southern, to Geechee Technical Colleges, and support the communities. I think there is a conscious effort on part of economic development to ensure that we get good people coming to the state and making their investments and putting our folks to work, but providing good investments for them in their livelihood in years to come.
One thing, and this has a little bit of that, but one thing that Governor Kemp has done, he recognized very fast that our state employees were highly underpaid. And he jumped on that. And we've got some state agencies in Georgia that a turnover rate is as high as 90% a year. Juvenile justice system, they say, is like 98% a year. So some of y'all may say, well, we've been giving all this money to the state patrols and to other agencies and all, but these people were so highly underpaid. So we wanted to create a career for these people rather than just having a job for these people. And that's been a big, big push with Governor Kemp.
All right, thank you. And last, we've covered a lot of ground today, but I did want to give each of you an opportunity if you wanted to comment on any certain legislation that was passed this past session or could be coming up, if y'all would like to give any insight on anything that's near and dear to y'all.
I'll mention some, and actually Brandon Smith sent me a text last night, so this is a paid announcement here. We actually passed, not in 23, but in 22, Senate Bill 311, and many of you law enforcement people refer to it as the Less Crime Act, okay? And it's actually a law enforcement strategic support act. What is that for? I know we have in Statesboro, our city police have a foundation. Our sheriffs have a foundation. You can make a contribution to these foundations because they're a 501c3 organization and get a tax deduction. Well, that's fine. What this bill does, this actually allows you to get a tax credit. Big, big difference. But it has to be to a foundation like this. And what that means is if your tax liability, or you owe $5,000 in taxes, you can make a contribution to the sheriff's foundation or police foundation here for $5,000, and you owe zero taxes. Okay, zero taxes. So that actually was signed by the governor in May of 22. It was for tax years beginning January 1 of 23. So you're eligible to do it now. And it's $5,000 for a single person or head of household, or $10,000 for marriage only. So I know definitely Joanne and I would definitely make a contribution both to the Sheriff's Foundation, and this is not for me to get more votes by no means by saying this, but hopefully it helps. But I know we will both be making contributions to the Sheriff's Foundation and the City of Statesboro Police Foundation because of this. This will be used by these foundations. If you go back to the law says, or the bill says, that it has to be can be used for salary supplements, but it also can be used to purchase, lease, maintenance, and improvement of equipment to be used by such officers, or to be covered, and this is very, very important, to cover any costs incurred by the local law enforcement unit for the operation of an emergency response team that combines with law enforcement officers. Very good bill. This was our Lieutenant Governor's bill that year. Senate Bill 361. If you got any questions, call your local accountant, call your CPA, they can help you out on it.
One of the passions I have, and I see John in the back, he's had to listen to this before, is foster care. We had, when I came into office, about 14,000 children in foster homes across Georgia. There are wards, they don't have families. And what really rips my heart out at night is as of last night, we had 55 that slept in either a hotel or a DFACS office. And we're tackling that. Thank you, Speaker Burns. Thank you, colleagues, for helping us tackle that. One is too many, 55 is 55 too many, particularly when we are their parents. And that is, we will resolve that before I leave the legislature. When it's done, y'all know I'll leave. So.
In conjunction with the Senate, the House has made strategic investments with your tax dollars and my tax dollars, whether it be working with Governor Kemp to return $2 billion to us. I forgot about the billion we did in making sure we made ourselves whole with the suspension on the gas tax. So that's actually $3 billion that have come back to Georgians. And still a robust economy has given us an opportunity to look at cutting taxes, our income tax rate. So things are going pretty well on the state level and the local level as well. So we're working hard on education, health care. So those things are important to us, but Billy hit on a very important subject. If we don't feel secure in our homes, I'm not sure if we're in the right place. So when we ask people to go out and risk their lives, our public safety officers, that law enforcement officers that risk their lives to go out and apprehend criminals. Doesn't happen in this Geechee circuit, but many circuits, district attorneys decide to prosecute who they would like and to ignore the law on those that they don't want to prosecute. So guess what? Someone may be arrested or arrested for a felony this afternoon, and guess who that officer's looking at in the morning? The same person, because the district attorney has decided that's not a crime they will prosecute. I don't know about y'all, I know about these guys, but when I swore this oath to serve in this position, I swore an oath to uphold the laws, the Constitution of these United States and the laws of the state of Georgia. If I didn't like them, I'm going to work to change them, but I darn sure can't ignore them. So, to that end, we passed prosecutorial oversight. So that makes sure that there is, as I saw Judge Pete here a few minutes ago, there's oversight for Superior Court judges in this state if they don't do their jobs. There was none for prosecutors. There will be now. So we want to make sure they do their job, so when our law enforcement officers, men and women, risk their lives to apprehend criminals, then they do spend some time in jail and they're held accountable. We're excited about doing that. It was a good work between the House and Senate. We moved that bill forward, and we'll continue to make sure that we're all safe as we walk the streets of our communities and as we're in our homes, to make sure public safety is job one for us in the House and the Senate.
All right, we're going to wrap it up, and I do appreciate everybody coming and speaking, and our own Casey Hagan is going to close us.
On behalf of Morris Bank and Bulloch County, I'd like to express my appreciation for our speakers today. Thank you for your time and your efforts and all that you do, and the legislation that you have put through that I know is going to benefit all of Georgia. I'd also like to thank again those that helped put all of this together. Our employees at Morris Bank are incredible helpers that are always willing to step in and do whatever I or Trish or John ask them to do. Additionally, thank you all for attending. It's important that we have people in our community that are willing to step up and take initiative to make sure that we are all building a better Bulloch, and we appreciate all of you, all of your questions that you were submitted. Additionally, if you have other questions, please remember to put those in the back. We want to thank you again for your interest and your care about our community and its future growth. I believe we're all committed to building a better Bulloch together, and if we can do anything at Morris Bank, please let us know. Y'all have a great afternoon.